Installment of Ramblings of a First-Time Game Developer. If this is your first time here, this is just me basically documenting my progress for my game. Don't expect any special effects or nice editing. Honestly, I just found a script to cut out all the silences, and that's all I'm going to do with these videos. And the main reason for that is I don't want to spend more time editing videos and actually working on my game. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's jump right into this one. So I wanted to spend some time adding a bit of polish to the dog, add some animations, think about the state changes. So you can see here I already introduced an animation tree with a animation state machine. So in certain situations, the dog can eat, which is just a lay down animation. In some situations, the dog can bark, which I actually do have a barking animation. It can walk. You can't really see this one yet, and run, and this is all based on different states or different properties. So for walking, it's mainly just about speed. So if you get to a certain speed, then you start walking. To run, I have it so that I have this kind of acceleration thing in the code. So basically after walking for about half a second, the dog will start running, and also increase the velocity, but that's the main transition. And then if they start walking again, so I have trackers for how long the dog's been walking, how long the dog's been running for. For eating, this is just basically a state change. So we're just going to check the state if the current state is eating and then not eating to go back to idle. And similarly to barking, we'll just have a state change for if the current state is barking or not. And so let's see this in action a bit. So here, the dog is here. Let me take off the debug labels so you don't get, it's a little bit easier to see. So let's turn this off. Okay, so then if I make the dog hungry, if it comes to me, it follows me. If I run for a bit, I hope you can hear the barking animation. But if I start running or going faster, the dog runs after me. And then if it stops, yeah, so you can see that there's a little bit of build up before it starts running. The other thing that you see is that when it discovers a bowl, it barks. Hopefully you can hear that too. And then it follows me after that. If I pick this up and then feed it, this is its eating animation, and then it's done. And now it's no longer following me because it's not hungry anymore. So if I make it hungry again, then it barks again because it's near the food bowl, and then it's following me to say, hey, get some food in this thing. Cool. So those were the changes I made to the dog. I found a new dog sprite sheet that was on this resources thing. And yeah, but this actually exposed kind of a lot of bugs in my state machine, my AI behavior, my interactions thing. So of course I had to go back into and think about how this was all working. So for example, before, when my dog was eating, or if I put the bowl in, the dog would eat right away and not finish barking, which caused some issues. Another problem was that when the dog was eating, I could actually pick up the bowl and walk away, but now I can't. I have to wait till after it's done. So I introduced a few systems here to kind of help this out. So I can kind of maybe introduce the state system first. So I created this diagram in Plant UML to kind of talk about how the dog would behave. So maybe from the state point of view, in general, it starts in idle state, and from right now, it can only go from idle to following, idle to walking, and idle to eating. I guess I can idle to barking. I maybe need to update that. But it's a little different. So basically, maybe I'll clean this up actually. Let's not have eating be idle because it's a little misleading. So let's do idle, eating to idle. No. You go back to eating. Okay, I was reading that wrong. I thought I had this. So from the idle state, you can only really go from following to walking. And this is based on some kind of stimulus. And the stimulus here is typically the need. So I made the dog hungry. So what does the dog do? Well, if the dog is hungry and there's a food bowl in the area, it'll try to walk to the food bowl first to check if there's food. If there's no food bowl available, then it just kind of follows me instead. And as it's following me, it can also check to see if there's a food bowl close by, and also then trigger that walking to food bowl. And then only from walking can it do barking or eating. And the idea here is that first it walks to the target, the food bowl. It checks to see if the food bowl is empty. If it is, then it barks. And after it barks, then it starts following me again because it's kind of annoyed that there's no food and it's like trying to get my attention. Or if the food bowl is full, then it eats. And after it finishes eating, then it's no longer hungry, so it goes back to its idle state. So this is kind of the way things flow through my diagram. Technically, in my state machine, after walking, it actually resets back to idle very quickly. And then in my walking function, do I check to see, if there's a need still met or not. So yeah, that's kind of the state machine that I built for this. And then this kind of interacts a bit with then how do I set up actions? Because when I'm in the walking state, how do I switch to barking? Or how do I switch to following? And so then I kind of had to introduce this idea of a state queue. So basically there's going to be a current state and then an upcoming state. And that's basically it for now. I'm not sure if I'm going to need to then have a list of upcoming states or a list of upcoming things to allow the dog to do in sequence. But for now, I just have the current state and the next one. So say the dog is following me, then there's a little priority going on. So actually, this is actually in the order priority. So this says, I can show you that here. Let's go into the dog. Where are you? Dog. So I created this concept of a priority and if an interaction is interruptible or not. So I have this dog state information, which has two properties. One is if you can interrupt this state, and what is the priority of the state. So for being idle, the priority is 0, the lowest, and it can be interrupted. For following, this can also be interrupted, and walking, this can also be interrupted, but walking has higher priority than following. And this is, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this yet, but in my mind, I was thinking following the player would be a default behavior, and then it should be easily interrupted by other things. I might need to introduce two concepts of following, maybe one for following player as that kind of similar to idle. And then maybe if we're having some quests where you need to follow a character or follow some smell or something like that, then this might need to be a higher priority so you don't accidentally interrupt it with other things. So I'm going to think about that a little bit later, but for now I think this is okay. And so what happens is in my state machine now, or my behavior decisioning, let me go back to the view. So basically in every process function, during the process, we're going to check to decide if we need to do something or not. And this is basically based on if we are idle and if we have a need. And so these are two things that kind of play into this. And then there's also this other thing that I'll add a little bit later. So let's just assume currently that the dog is idle and not doing anything. So we can see that in the view here. So right now, let me restart this. Oops. And let me add back on the debug label so you can see the state and current state. So here right now, you can see that the current state is idle and there's no need. The dog is not hungry yet, a little hungry, but not in the point where it takes over its primary drive. And then the next state is also idle. So what happens is once I create a stimulus, the dog can move from idle to some other state. And depending on what's nearby, it'll either follow me or it'll walk to the food bowl. So if I make it now hungry, you can see now it's eating, the need is eat, and it's now currently following the player. If I walk close enough to this food bowl, then that's where this other thing kicks in. So here, right now the decision planner is basically decided it requested the state of following the player, and that's all it's going to do until some other stimulus happens. And so the other stimulus then is my memory. So I introduced this kind of concept of a memory, where anytime something enters the detector of the dog, then it gets added to its memory, whether that's food, water, or something else. I really just only did food and water for now. And this memory adding, as part of that, it checks to see if there is a current need. So if it detects a food bowl, for example, and adds it to the memory, it'll also say, is the dog hungry? If so, let's request a state update to, actually this needs to be moved this way, actually. This needs to go directly to state scheduler. So memory goes to scheduler, actually, directly. Why didn't that change? Okay, let's ignore that. This should go, it did go to scheduler. Okay, I missed it. And so what this then does is it tries to request a state change to walk to the food bowl. And then my state scheduler system will check the priority of the current state and if it's interruptible. So in this case, as I mentioned before, following is lower priority than walking to something, and following is also interruptible. So what happens is then the current state is then replaced immediately with walking. And so we can see that in action here. So now if I walk a little bit close to the thing, you see walking, barking, and now following again. So what's happening is when it gets the bowl, it finds that the bowl is empty, as I said before, and we request a new state of seeking attention, or barking in this case. And so this barking state then is finished. Once that's finished, then it realizes the need is still met, so then it's still unmet, so it's going to follow the player. And that's how this whole interaction system works. And yeah, I think that was actually a pretty cool thing to dive into, quite complicated. Maybe one other thing that I mentioned in the beginning was that I could pick up the bowl while the dog was eating. So I can pick up the bowl while it's barking. It doesn't, because the dog is not actually using the bowl. But when it's actually eating, I can no longer pick up the bowl until after it's finished. And the way I did that was I also then introduced a kind of reservation system. So in my reservation system, you see it's kind of hard to see. Let's restart this. But one other nice, I didn't mention this, but one thing that I added to my home scene was a world environment, which has this glow. And so basically what happens is when something is detected as usable by the player, it has a little glow to it. So you can know what you can interact with and what you can't interact with. So for example, when I walk to the kibble bag, it glows. This one also glows a little bit less intense. And then this also glows, right? So that means I can interact with these things. So if I put the bowl down and I stand next to it, you see that's a little different, right? And now if I make the dog hungry, the glow disappears. It means I can't interact with it, and now I can. And so this thing is based on a reservation system because my animations take time to perform. And so the dog is not actually interacting with the food bowl. It's not getting its hunger filled, or it's not actually emptying it until after the animation is complete. But during that time, I don't want anything else to interact with this item. And so I introduced an interaction system, reservation system. So basically in this reservation system, if I go to my interactable, I have a reserve timer. And basically if this timer is stopped, then someone can reserve this object. And all I do is just hide it from the detection layer. So this object is usually on a certain collision layer for my interactable objects or interacting things. And I just remove it from that. So that means nothing else can detect this thing. And so it can't be interacted anymore with, or it can't be interacted with anymore. Yeah, and I thought this was also a kind of clever way to fix this problem of being able to interact with things or not interact with things without having to introduce, a new state of is interactable or can be used or whatever. This just kind of removes it from detection and then puts it back in after. And so I also then create this how long should this thing be reserved by. And so in my dog, when you are start eating, then I already know how long I want the animation to be for. So this is 2 seconds. And so I just also reserve it for 2 seconds. I can make this a little bit longer just in case for some edge cases, but I think this is completely fine for my thing. Yeah. So I think that's everything that I wanted to share for this round. I actually wanted to, next time, I'm not sure what I'm going to build yet. My initial plan was to build out the rest of the tutorial, meaning the next quest, day, night cycle, and things like that. But I think I want to build out some of the world a little bit and maybe getting these things. Because my idea for the first scene was that you actually don't have the dog, you rescue the dog. And so then you need to pick up these or buy the kibble bag, the food bowl, and the water bowl and things like that. So I think that would be kind of interesting to maybe build a shop next and maybe a way to buy things. So this could be entering a money system, a buying system, and then also I guess holding things as well. I should also mention that I plan on also doing the visuals in Blender. I want to do 3D modeling and then flatten it to a kind of a 2D kind of thing. So I might also be slowing down a little bit my videos, or they'll be shorter because I'm also going to be spending time learning Blender. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.